Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
And sometimes, like today, we answer your questions. At least that's what I do, because it's Wednesday. That means that it is the Ask Me Anything, where I answer your questions, or in this case, I answer your question, singular, because there is only one. But it's one of these questions to where on the surface it seems as though it would be a very easy question to answer. But once you sort of dig a little bit, and I realize that this time I'm digging a little further than I needed to in order to answer this question. But it is one of those things to where there's basically several layers to this question, and it lets me talk about money a little bit. And it's something that I enjoy discussing. Not that I have a lot of it, but like the history of money is what I enjoy discussing, especially with people that try to sort of misrepresent things. And I'll explain what I mean as I go through the show. But the question comes from a friend of mine who posted a picture on the social media website Sue, which is spelled TSU.co. And it's a picture of a national banknote from the Cobleskill National Bank of New York. And I've got a picture of a similar bill that I will post the link to in the show notes so you can kind of see a better picture of it. And let me read what the note says. At the very top, and if you, for sort of reference, pull out any paper dollar out of your billfold, your wallet, etc., and sort of, like, play the home game with me. So at the top, where now it says Federal Reserve Note, and then up under it says United States of America, this at the very top says national currency secured by United States bonds deposited with the Treasurer of the United States of America. And let me explain that before I continue. This referred to the requirement of the National Banking Act that the amount of currency a national bank could issue was based on the market value of Treasury bonds on deposit with the Comptroller of Currency. So up under that, on current bills on the left-hand side, it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And then it's got the seal of whichever of the 12 Federal Reserve Bank branches issued the note. On this, the national currency $20 bill, which is what's in the photograph, it says the Cobleskill National Bank, New York, and then it says, will pay the bearer on demand $20. And then on the right side of the bill, and I realize there's a serial number. There's not really any difference between the serial numbers other than like the color of ink. But then on the right side, where now it up under the serial number it says Washington, D.C., it's got the Treasury seal and in big letters, whatever the denomination. So a $1 bill would say 1, a $20 bill would say 20, etc., etc. Although I think the new 20s are kind of different. No, it still says 20 on the newer $20 bills. But this, it's got that sort of watermark sort of thing to where the word 20 is there. The seal is red, not green, and over top of that is more writing that says redeemable in lawful money of the United States at United States Treasury or the bank of issue. And the question is about that. It says, what was this bill redeemable for? And, well, to really get the answer, you have to know what the laws were in 1929, and actually being able to find copies of laws from 1929 proved to be somewhat difficult. But I did come across a couple different websites, and before I get into that, for comparison, I have a photo that I was able to find of a Federal Reserve note from 1934. And let me give you some of the differences between that note in 1934 and the current notes that we have. The current note, I told you, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. In 1934, it said, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve Bank. And prior to 1933, it included either gold or silver. So I've heard. I've not actually been able to find a large photo of a bill prior to 1933 to be able to actually read what it says. But I came across a website called uspapermoney.info, and I did not realize, I guess I did, but it was one of those things that never really clicked in my head. Prior to 1933, there were actually 5 different types of paper money in the United States. And I'll get into that and explain that in just a little bit, but to actually answer the question about what could one of these notes be redeemed for, well, the answer is lawful money at the time was a gold coin, a silver coin, a gold or a silver certificate, or a United States note. Now, what is a United States note? Because that's something that I'm sure a lot of people have probably never heard of, or if you have heard of, you've not really thought a lot about. The United States notes were a type of fiat. And what exactly is fiat? Fiat is anything that is issued by decree. So you might hear a lot of people talk about the Federal Reserve note being fiat currency, and they say it's based on debt. Well, true and not true. So, yes, it is a fiat currency because it was created by decree. The Congress in 1913 decreed that the Federal Reserve would have a, well, at the time it wasn't a monopoly on issuing currency, but they would have the right to issue currency, and basically they had a charter to do so. So that is what made it fiat. The fact that now it is not backed by anything is what makes it a debt currency, not the fact that it's fiat that made it debt. And the United States note could be redeemed, but it was still fiat, and I'll explain when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Coinbase is a simple and secure online Bitcoin wallet for sending, receiving, and storing Bitcoin. Coinbase also allows you to buy and sell Bitcoin using a bank account or use their tools to accept Bitcoin as a merchant. Coinbase has more than 1 million consumer wallets and is trusted by over 25,000 merchants, including Overstock.com, Khan Academy, Reddit, and of course, FPP. Get started at coinbase.fppradio.com. In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So I will explain United States notes, silver certificates, gold certificates, bank notes, and Federal Reserve notes momentarily. But I want to make sure that I tell you about something that is always going to be valuable and something that is not fiat, not now, not ever. That is gold and silver. And where you might be asking yourself, can you get some gold and silver? I'm glad you asked that to yourself. That way I can tell you you can get some gold and silver from Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. People have been doing so since 1977. And for those nearly 39 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They now take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for some knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 850-478-5270 or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. So the United States note, it's something that if you've got an old $2 bill, and it has to be a really old one, like before 1971. You might also have a 1 or a 5 that is a United States note. And again, would have to have been before 1971 because that is when United States notes stopped being issued. United States notes, also called a legal tender note, is a type of paper currency that was issued in the U.S. from 1862 to 1971. And they were sometimes called greenbacks, and they inherited that name from the demand notes that they replaced in 1862. Often called legal tender notes, they were called United States notes by the first Legal Tender Act, which authorized them as a form of currency by fiat. During the 1860s, the so-called second obligation on the reverse of the note stated, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, except duties on imports and interest on the public debt, and is redeemable in payments of all loans made to the United States." So the United States note was created by congressional decree at the behest of the tyrant Lincoln. Lincoln, you know, the guy that started a war that killed nearly 600,000 Americans. Yeah, that guy. He created the United States note. And there's a lot of conspiracy about this. Some people say that he created this to get away from the central bankers and something, blah, blah, blah. That's why he was assassinated. But the problem with that theory is there was no central bank in the United States when the Civil War was taking place. Lincoln created this United States note so that he could fund the war. Lincoln needed a way to fund the war, so he created the United States note. And in 1862, it was just a $1 bill, had a picture of Salmon P. Chase. George Washington became the face of the $1 bill in 1869. And then they started putting out the $2 bills, those initially came out 1862, had Alexander Hamilton, and then Jefferson became the face in 1869. And a $5 bill initially had a picture of the Statue of Freedom, and Thomas Crawford was the artist. Alexander Hamilton was the person portrayed on that, and then Andrew Jackson became the face in 1869. Abraham Lincoln was initially on the $10 United States note, then replaced by Daniel Webster in 1869. But what does any of this have to do with silver certificates or silver or gold? And how the hell does the Federal Reserve tie into any of this? And why is this, why is this worthless, even though it could be redeemed for something? Like, you could pay your taxes with it, and that's really what makes money valuable, right? Is the fact that you can pay off government goons. That's what makes money, really, because, like, lawful money is anything that the government says you can pay a tax with. So the actual definition here for fiat, before I continue ranting and raving and rambling about different kinds of money, fiat actually comes from the Latin "let it be" or "it shall be." And it commonly refers to money. Commodity money, there's two different types, or actually three different types of money. There's fiat, commodity, and representative. Commodity money is created from a good, often a precious metal such as silver or gold. So silver certificates were technically not fiat, although it could be portrayed that they were, because there were more silver certificates in circulation than there was actual silver that could be redeemed for it. So, it could be claimed that anything above and beyond what could actually be redeemed was thus fiat, because it was just like, here it is, like, it shall be redeemable except for when it's not, because we don't have any more. So there's commodity money and then representative money, and representative money simply represents a claim on such a thing. So the silver certificate could, in theory, also be representative money because, well, this says that there's a piece of silver. Whether or not there actually is, it's questionable. So let's get back to the 5 different kinds of money that existed prior to 1933. And why was 1933 important? Well, 1933 is the year in which gold was removed from the Federal Reserve bills. As far as, or actually it was January 30th, 1934 when it took effect. It was passed in 1933. A notation from the the Cornell University Law School, where they have the United States Code. They have a notation about U.S. Code 12, Section 411. It's actually Title 12, Chapter 3, Subchapter 12, Section 411, and it says, January 30th, 1934, struck out from last sentence provision permitting a redemption in gold. So prior to 1934, prior to January 30th of 1934, you could take a Federal Reserve note and get gold. And in theory, you could have taken any of these notes that said redeemable for lawful money, and you could get gold or silver or anything else that had been decreed as this is money under the United States laws. Like, this is money. So the 5 different kinds of money. There were silver certificates, which were redeemable for other types of lawful money or silver. There were gold certificates, which were redeemable for gold or other types of money. There was the United States note that I already talked about, and the Federal Reserve note, in addition to the National Bank note. And I'll explain what the silver, gold, and Federal Reserve notes are when we come back on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So before I explain the silver certificate, the gold certificate, and the Federal Reserve note, and why none of those things had anything to do with John Kennedy getting killed, I want to make sure I tell you about Survivor Max, who so far has not been killed by the zombies. The slow-moving, non-thinking, lame brains have swarmed the home of 11-year-old Survivor Max, who must survive the zombie apocalypse alone in New Hampshire. They, that's these zombies, they're looking for living flesh. Max is looking to survive, and to do so, he must apply his Porcupine Freedom Scouts training to plan his escape. But before he escapes, he has to prove that he's too smart to die. You can look for Survivor Max on Facebook, read some reviews on Amazon, or you can read the very first chapter of Survivor Max absolutely free at survivormax.com. That's survivormax.com. So I already read what was on the national banknote in 1929. And all of these notes, they have slightly varying things written on them. So the silver certificate carried the obligation. This certifies that that there has been deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America $1 silver payable to the bearer on demand. The legend, and legend not like it's a myth, but there's like another notation says this certificate is redeemable for all public dues when so received may be reissued, meaning that once that was collected by the U.S. Treasury, they could then turn around and put it back into circulation. Assuming that they were receiving that for some sort of debt that was, like a public debt, not a private debt. But in theory, they could also have reissued that, even if somebody redeemed it to get the piece of silver, because that's what they do. That's the whole thing about reserve currency and fractional reserve, is that you have more paper in circulation than what you actually have that can be redeemed. The United States note carries the obligation. The United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand, fill in the blank dollars. And the legend, that's the other inscription, stated this note is a legal tender and its face value for all debts, public and private, except duties on imports and interest on the public debt. The Federal Reserve note in 1928 said, the United States of America will pay to the bearer on demand, fill in the blank dollars. And further stated, redeemable in gold on demand at the United States Treasury or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve bank. And the reference to gold was removed in 1934 because, well, the tyrant FDR decided that private gold ownership was outlawed, and people that had gold, they had that seized. And the dollars, the Federal Reserve note dollars, could still be redeemed for gold by foreign governments, not by any person within the United States. That went away. The foreign conversion to gold or redemption to gold went away in 1971 when Richard Nixon did the Bretton Woods Decree and completely off the gold standard. And I'll rant about the gold standard a little bit if I get the chance. Speaking of gold standard, there was the gold certificate that carried the obligation. This certifies that there has been deposited in the Treasury of the United States, fill-in-the-blank dollars in gold coin, payable to the bearer on demand. It further said, this certificate is a legal tender in the amount thereof in payment of all debts and dues, public and private. And then I already read what was on the national banknote. Now, the silver certificate and the gold certificate and the United States note were all different versions of bills issued by the U.S. government. The U.S. note, the United States note, started being issued in 1862. The silver certificates were initially issued in 1878. They were issued through 1964, and they came about with the Fourth Coinage Act, which had effectively placed the United States on a gold standard. The certificates were initially redeemable for their face value of silver dollars, and later for 1 year, from June 24th, 1967 to June 24th, 1968, in raw silver bullion. Since 1968, they have been redeemable only in Federal Reserve notes and thus are obsolete but still valid legal tender. So there was the Coinage Act of 1873 that intentionally omitted language authorizing the coinage of standard silver dollars and ended the bimetallic standard that had been created by Alexander Hamilton. While the Coinage Act of 1873 stopped production of silver dollars, it was the 1874 adoption of Section 3568 of the revised statutes that actually removed legal tender status from silver certificates in the payment of debts exceeding $5. By 1875, business interest invested in silver wanted the bimetallic standard restored. People began to refer to the passage of the act as the Crime of 73. Prompted by a sharp decline in the value of silver in 1876, congressional representatives from Nevada and Colorado began lobbying for a change. Further, public agitation for silver use was driven by fear that there was not enough money in the community. Members of Congress claimed ignorance that the 1873 law would lead to the demonetization of silver, despite having had 3 years to review the bill prior to it being enacted into law. So in 1878, they wound up passing the Bland-Allison Act, and, well, free and unlimited coinage of silver was demanded by Western miners, but it did require the United States Treasury to purchase between $2 and $4 million of silver bullion per month from mining companies in the West to be minted into coins. So that is where the silver certificate came from. The gold certificate was issued beginning in 1863. And it was also authorized by the same act that created the United States note, but unlike the United States note, they apparently were not printed until 1865. They did not have a series date and were hand-dated upon issue. Issue meant that the government took in the equivalent value of gold And the first several series of gold certificates promise to pay the amount only to the depositor who is explicitly identified on the certificate itself. Meaning that unless your name was written on that, you couldn't get gold from it. And, well, we're out of time, so I don't have time to tell you why none of this had anything to do with Kennedy getting assassinated. Maybe next week someone will ask that question. This has been Peace, Love, and Liberty Radio.